Well, it's the middle of January here in northern Michigan, and the temperature's 15 degrees out, and it hasn't stopped snowing in 4 days, and it's that time of year where we should start thinking about filling our boxes up for spring steelhead season. And probably one of the biggest fly patterns that I've put in my box in the spring is what I call my PM Parr. This fly is probably a staple that I use every spring when it comes to fishing for steelhead and trout on the Pure Marquette River.
Please stay with Jeff until the end of this video and learn some tips and tricks that allow Jeff's clients to be successful.
So when I developed this fly, it's, you're resembling a bait fish. So instead of trying to make, like your nymph fly, I'm trying to make more of a wet fly sort of thing with a lot of movement to it, just like a bait fish would move. For the hook, I use a size 6 or 8. I would recommend you want to use something 1x strong and 1x long. Just remember you're fishing for steelhead, so you don't want a flimsy light wire trout hook for this. This one I use the Daiichi 1560, which works really well, a very sharp hook. And basically same thing for the thread I use. I want to use something strong. This is a 140, the Alter thread, just because we're cinching a lot of this stuff down, including wrapping the plastic eyes on this. So we want something heavy duty, so we're getting a nice tight cinch on it. But this is a pretty simple fly. It doesn't really take much to make it. Just about 4 ingredients for the recipe, and then including the plastic eyes, you got 5. So what I'm gonna do is you always want to start getting a good thread wrap, a good base to lay your material on, and you don't want to crowd the eye too much because you're gonna go to the back and work your way forward, stacking the material as you go. So I'm just gonna wrap this hook pretty good a couple times around. Just get a good thread wrap. And then for the tail of this fly, what I like to use is just this grizzly marabou. This is the natural, which it's pretty much white. So even though it says natural, it's actually the white color. You gotta just be careful when you're picking your feathers out for the tail. What I like to do is find something kind of smaller to medium, because you can get some really big pieces of marabou in here, and we don't want to overcrowd our hook. So as you can see, you got really big, and then you have kind of a medium to small. And I like to go more to the medium size to small size for this fly, just because we don't want to overcrowd the material. So like these would be a good starting point, and they even make them smaller, stuff like this. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to tie this on as the tail. So we're going to tie it flat with the shiny side up, dull side down. And I just want to do a little tail, so I'm only just going to go about 1.25 inches off the back. I don't want this way back here because then it's just going to spin around the hook. So we're just going to start with a little piece. And I kind of put it on like this because it's going to wrap around, as you can see right there. So now it's flat to the hook. And that's it. And then what I'm going to do is, we don't want to cut this. We're going to fold this back and just do a few wraps in front of it. Just like that. And then next for the body, I like to use the Ice Dub Caddis Green. I try to make this fly kind of bright because we all know that steelhead like bright colors. They like to focus on bright stuff. So I'm kind of using, instead of trying to make it more natural, like an actual Parr or a fry pattern would have more of a kind of olive hue, and you can do that too. You could use olive marabou and just make it more like actually matching the hatch. And then all I'm going to do is just wrap it nice and tight around the shank of the hook and kind of go right to about the middle. And then what I want to do is right at the end, I'm going to almost make like just a little ball on the thorax here at the end of my dub here. So it's going to look something like that. And then the next step is I use a flank feather, but you want to use something small, like this size, you can see how it's a little thicker and a little more webbed. So that's going to give you a lot of movement, just like a soft hackle wet fly is basically at this point what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is get this is just a little mallard flank. You could use wood duck flank. And what I'm doing is I'm going to strip this down just a little bit. And I'm going to tie this in tip first. And same thing, you could see the shape of it, that's your top. So the bottom of it's dull, and we want these fibers to go this way naturally with the fly because it's the same with the current. The current's going to make it move. So I'm going to tie this in tip first, just like so. And then just wrap your thread just a little bit towards the eye of the hook, just like that. And then what I'm going to do, and this is why I put that little ball in the thorax, because it's going to give this flank feather even more movement. So I'm just going to kind of palmer it and spread it out as I go with my fingers. And maybe 2 or 3 wraps. You don't need to do a ton. Just like so. And then I'll just cinch it down tight. 2 or 3 wraps. And then I'm going to cut that excess stem off. So at this point it looks like this. Then what I'm going to do is, you could get your fingers wet or just try to push all this back so it settles over the body. And then tie it off. So there, at this point you have basically a soft hackle wet fly. So these fibers will give it a lot of movement as it's swinging through the current. And then the next step I would recommend is I'm going to tie in my mono plastic eyes. That way it gives me an idea of how far I need to go and where I need to be when I finish this fly off. I like using the red eyes. When I put the orange egg hot spot in front of it, it still kind of resembles an egg with a nucleus. And these plastic eyes, you can find them, they're like a medium size. And you can find them like at craft stores. I'm sure you can find them on eBay or Amazon. They use them a lot for crafts, like for dolls. And you can get them in all different colors, even black. So when I put these eyes on, I just kind of do a figure 8 with the thread. And then I'll cinch it down. And then to finish it off, I'll add the ice dub orange. And same thing, I don't need much. I'm just going to dub it onto the thread. Just get a nice little, and then I'll just kind of wrap it around in front of the eyes. I'm going to add a little bit more, just so it gives it that sparkle. It's basically, you're just putting a hot spot, almost like an egg sucking leech, which we know is probably one of my favorite, most effective swing flies on the Pere Marquette River. So we're just going to wrap like that, and then we're going to come around the front of those eyes just like so. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the top of this marabou and I'm going to pull it over and cinch it down. What I like to do is I just take this extra feathers and pull it right off the stem. Like so. And then I'll kind of stroke it back with my fingers, and then I'm just going to cinch it down right in front of the eye. get a nice base of thread, and you can put head cement on this. I tie so many flies that I don't really use a lot of head cement because I go through flies pretty quick. But that's basically it. Has a lot of movement. This stuff will flutter even as the current's hitting it on top. He almost has like a little mohawk. And then we'll just whip finish. It's a pretty simple fly and it's very effective. Anywhere in the Great Lakes region that sees salmon in the fall that come up the rivers to spawn. This is an overlooked pattern, and it's probably one of the most prolific hatches that we actually see on the Pere Marquette River. And this resembles an alevin or a fry or a salmon parr pattern. And as the water warms in the spring, you will find these little minnows all over the place. And a lot of people think that's just what they are, but they're actually baby king salmon that have hatched as the water warms in the spring from the king salmon that came in the year before in the fall to spawn and drop their eggs. So this has become a very staple in my box since probably 2005 or 6 when I started tying this, and it works really, really well. My method of fishing this probably the most is under a strike indicator as a nymph. I tie it as a dropper behind an egg fly, and it's just a really good fly to have on in the spring. I usually start fishing this kind of late February all the way through May, depending on the water temps and how many I see. Usually at the end of February, I'll start seeing these little minnows. They like to sit in the softer water, so they'll actually sit along the banks like where you're wading. So keep your eyes peeled, because if you start seeing them, it's a good indication to tie one on. With this fly, you can also probably chuck and duck it, and I even tie it bigger to swing as the spring goes on for drop back steelhead. One of the biggest things that I can, as far as a tactic or a technique with fishing this fly under a strike indicator, is I always tell my clients to let it swing out before you bring it in, because you'll find you'll catch a lot of trout and steelhead as this fly is starting to lift to the surface as it comes to the end of the drift. So don't just pull your drift out when you think it's done. Let it swing out towards the sand, almost to like where you're wading and fishing it. And you will find that a lot of the trout especially like to grab it as it's starting to come up to the surface and as the current's pulling it up at the end of your drift. And I think they think it's either wounded or it's trying to flee away from them, and they really, basically look at it and it really entices them to take it.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of this type of content, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. Good luck fishing.